The Backdoor GAA Podcast for 2023 is now brought to you by Steede Motor Group. For your personalised vehicle shopping experience, visit steedemotorgroup.ie. We are now delighted to announce our second sponsor of the podcast. Harper Finlay are a professional service recruitment company operating nationwide and are dedicated to helping people find their dream job.
So delighted now to be joined by former Galway senior footballer Barry Cullinane and Donnchadh Boyle of the Irish Independent to look back on Galway's victory over Westmeath at the weekend. And just in the last hour or two, it has been confirmed Galway's round 3 clash with Armagh. That takes place on June 18th in Claregalway at 4 p.m. And that's the final group game for Galway. So that's a game to look forward to, but it's definitely going to be a high demand for tickets for that game. Carrigan-Shannon only holding 9,000. But Barry, you're telling me off air there you have the Burlington booked already for the football and hurling finals.
Yeah, it looks like it's in the bag, doesn't it, this stage? But yeah, I tell you, in the hurling, we leave the experts. I know you have a few experts on stuff about the hurling, but I think Sunday will tell a lot for the Galway hurlers. But I think Galway footballers are certainly moving in the right direction. I actually hadn't heard that it was Carrick for the Armagh game, which is unusual. It'll be probably suit Armagh, I think, a little bit tighter. There'll be a fantastic atmosphere because it only holds 9,000. And you know what? Just my initial, I suppose, thoughts on that. Isn't it brilliant for these provincial towns that we have this neutral venue, because economically Carrigan-Shannon now probably gets enough hens and stags that it doesn't need an all-GAA match. But it's brilliant that it'll get that boost, and it'll get one of these qualifier games or one of these preliminary group games. So yeah, all roads lead to Carrick, and not for a hen and stag.
Donnchadh, just with that to bring you in here, was there any particular reason why there was a delay with these fixtures coming out? It just felt like it did take a while for all these fixtures to be released and venues and everything.
Well, I suppose there's a lot of moving parts to anything like this, and I suppose the other thing in defence of the GAA, this is the first time we've done this, so a lot of things would feed into fixture venues decision making, and obviously to try and get it somewhere roughly halfway between the two counties, they also need a venue that would hold the expected crowd. It's probably difficult enough to predict an expected crowd, considering this is the third round of a series in a truncated championship that has seen us play loads of games, and so fans are kind of stretched at the minute. But also you have to factor in whether the game means anything or much to either or both sides. So if your county's already out, how likely are you to travel? So there's loads of considerations I think they have to play into all that. There's obviously then anything that happens in any of these towns, particularly on a Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, you obviously have to go to the guards with that, just around traffic management and stuff like that. So there's loads of considerations to do it. And as I say, because this is the first time the GAA have done it, we had established patterns of behaviour made over 50 odd years over, who, Clare and Limerick would usually play wherever they would play, and Mayo and Galway would have home away arrangements and all those things. They're kind of gone out the window now because we're faced with new fixtures that we didn't see that much of, I think, over the last, as I say, 40, 50 years.
And what's your own view on Carrick being chosen for Galway or Armagh?
Well, Barry mentioned the capacity there, and for two teams that were in an All-Ireland quarter-final last year, it's probably disappointing enough in terms of what they're expecting. Clearly, they think that Carrick will comfortably hold the people who show up, but it's probably understandable, because if you're Armagh and Galway fans, you're going to be out again before this year is out. So maybe people are going to pick and choose the games to go to at this stage, because if you have been following your county since, say, the league, and maybe you've been at all your home league matches and you went to championship matches, you've gone deep into the pocket at this stage, and with everything else that's going on outside of the world of GAA, I think that's a consideration now for people, maybe in a way that it hasn't been for quite a while. So I think people maybe will just go, well, if I won't do this one, I'll do the next one. I think the game in Dublin, or the game between Dublin and Kildare and Kilkenny, was a good point. A brilliant weekend. Weather-wise, fantastic, in a great city, in a great stadium, in a great venue, and it was 9,000 or something like that. So I think people are voting with their feet a little bit, and maybe Carrick recognises that. In saying that, is there an obvious better venue? you could argue the toss where else it could be, but Carrick is probably, it would certainly be in the conversation when we're putting this together. So I don't see a major issue with it. I'd be surprised if other counties did too.
Yeah, there probably will be a few disappointed supporters because we all know the colour Armagh bring, and just with the feel good factor around Galway football as well at the minute. As well, Barry, like you definitely expected this Galway Armagh game going on last year and going on the way things are, that it's definitely going to sell out.
Yeah, it'll sell out. I my initial thoughts were that it could possibly have been like a Mayo, Cork, Galway, Armagh doubleheader in Croker, or a Roscommon, Kildare, Galway Armagh doubleheader in Croker. That was just my own thoughts on it. But as Donnchadh said, like there's a huge amount of considerations to take into it. Yeah, Armagh will bring a big crowd, and Galway will bring a crowd as well. You do, it's a good complaint, but you have to feel sorry for like the hardcore Galway supporter. Feel sorry is a poor terminology here, but like Sunday after Sunday, you're on the road to Dublin or you're on the road to, Westmeath last weekend, the minor final. Lots of people go to all of these games, and unfortunately, it does become expensive if you want to bring kids.
It's 2 trips to Carrick in a row as well if you go to the minor game this weekend.
Yeah, 100%. Carrick's a nice spin for Galway, but it does add up with the cost of everything. I'm not going to play the poor mouth here, but you a Galway supporter that does say, they're going to go to the quarter-final, guaranteed to go to, providing we get to a quarter-final, but just hypothetically, we'll be saying, right, I'm going to go to a quarter-final, maybe hopefully, please God, go to the All-Ireland hurling semi-final, and then possibly get either both or one of get to the All-Ireland final. That's a summer holiday in itself. So I don't think there'll be an absolute clamour for tickets from Galway supporters. Galway football have some unbelievable supporters that you see all over the country every single day, and obviously they'll all be there again en masse. But I think the 9,000, as Donnchadh said, like Kildare, Dublin probably would have had a bigger crowd than what it had at the weekend. So probably a nice choice of venue, and a full look at 9,000 or in a 9,000 or 10,000 seater capacity is a really good atmosphere. 9 or 10,000 people in a 30,000 capacity dilutes it a little bit. So it'll be a nice one to be at, and I'd say we'll be looking forward to a rip-roaring afternoon.
Yeah, particularly after last year, and it's a good point because there has been a decrease in crowd, so it is difficult to know as well what way it'll go. And it is looking extremely likely, Donnchadh, at the minute, the Galway are going to top this group. It really only comes down to goal difference. If Armagh and Tyrone both win, but Galway could still have enough. Like it's looking extremely likely now at the minute that they are probably going to get top seed in this group.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny one because you could, if you finish top seed, you get your 2 weeks off. But if you had like your business 100% taken care of this week, you could maybe look at, maybe trying a few things out. So Galway in a funny position. They will probably get to that quarterfinal, as you say, but at the same time, they probably don't want that extra game in the preliminary quarterfinal, particularly at the minute looking at the last day. And I don't know if there's been any word in Galway, but Shane Walsh limped out of the game the last day. You wonder how serious that injury is, how much time he needs. I think Tom Cullinane maybe looked like he went off with an injury as well. Did Rob Finnerty go off early in the game too? So he was gone after 7 or 8 minutes. So just from that point of view, just from pure minutes on the pitch and minutes in the body and the amount of games played in the tight period of time since the end of January, you probably would like that week off. Like you saw the use Mayo got in their 6 weeks and how good they looked when they came out against Kerry. So just that little, I think there's value in for teams who are making an assault on Sam. I think there's value in avoiding that preliminary quarterfinal because that'll be the first knockout game. It'll go up another little notch again. I think football's been quite good. It's, the system has its faults and probably a conversation for another day. But the I think that the amount of games, I think if you can knock one of that out, I think that will benefit whoever goes on to the All-Ireland final. I think if you miss that week, I think it could prove to be very beneficial.
Would you be concerned about those injuries, Barry?
Yeah, be concerned about any injury. So right now, as of this morning, if Galway were to play, if they play on Sunday, they were down. It looks like Dylan McHugh, it looks like Rob Finnerty, it looks like Shane Walsh, and I think Tom O'Callaghan was okay. I think it was just maybe a heavy knock on his shoulder. But the other three lads, like Dylan McHugh, soft tissue, you don't know where that is. I think
it's suspected. I think that he's back this week training.
Okay. So I think Shane Walsh picked up a bit of an ankle knock in training last week. He definitely didn't look. He looked a mile off. The Shane Walsh that we know in terms of his energy levels. He was well tagged, and Westmeath did a fine job in actually curtailing his influence, but he was limping heavily for a fair bit of the game. And Rob Finnerty, he's had ankle trouble before. He went off after 7 minutes, and the thing is now the ground is like Mullingar, to no fault of anyone, was like an absolute car park. I think probably the pitch in Saipan would have made it look like would have made it look soft, because it was really, really hard, and wasn't really surprised that someone went over an ankle early doors, and unfortunately it's Rob Finnerty. So we need all of them. There's no doubt about it. We need every single one of them as fit as they possibly can, and by, I suppose, law of averages, you kind of lose one player every game. So to lose, as Donnchadh said, the importance of avoiding that preliminary quarter-final can't be understated, and I think Galway will be doing everything in their power to make sure that they're the top seed going into the draw on the following Sunday.
It's a good point you make there about Mullingar. Even walking on the pitch after the game, Donnchadh, on Saturday, it was like a rock, but it was nearly like across nationwide. That's what all the pitches were like over the weekend.
Yeah, just it's particularly with the weather we're having, it's almost unavoidable, and it happened. Probably it went from being quite firm to being very hard, probably in the space of a few days, really, because the weather was so exceptional. So yeah, it's just, Barry mentioned injuries there, and that's going to be in the run-in now for all the teams left standing in the race for Sam Maguire. That's going to be key, because someone's going to pick up something that's going to be quite significant to one of the key players, and I suppose everyone's just hoping it's not their team. We
were talking there, Donnchadh, about clearing up those injuries, but obviously there's two noticeable players on their way back from injury at the minute. Sean Mulcairn made the 26, remarkably coming back from that kneecap injury he picked up in January 2021 in the Sigerson Cup. Then Kieran Malloy has somehow made it back from a cruciate back in training. But as poor Joyce was saying in the interview after the game, it's nearly tough for management to throw these players into the deep end, because both of them players are trying remarkably hard to get back, but to get up to this championship level from two serious injuries as well as a challenge.
Yeah, and there's no forgiveness in these games now either. You mentioned, we just talked about why it's important for Galway to top the group. If they do, they're in knockout football straight away. So where do you get the chance to feed them in? I suppose the only thing you can do is trust your training sessions and trust the eye test, as they call it. If they're moving well in the game and they have worked their way back into it, then give them their chance. Paul did actually mention that he wanted to get Sean Mulcairn on the pitch against Westmeath, but between injuries, and he thought the pitch was very hard. He just referenced the pitch being really hard, so maybe it wasn't the right thing to bring him back in. And he also referenced the fact that even when fellas are ready, and he was talking about Killian McDade when he came back from his injury, even when he was ready, are they actually ready to operate at the very high level? They might be physically prepared and ready to go and all that, but you do take, and Barry would know better, obviously, you do take time to get back up to the speed, just your touch, your confidence, your control, whatever it is, you do take that time. So, it's a tricky one to ask someone like say Kieran Malloy, who's obviously a brilliant footballer and a great asset, but to throw him straight into an Ireland quarter-final, say, would be a big ask. But it's an interesting thing, because I was doing a piece in the Independent yesterday just about sort of the way Galway have changed and evolved this year. And I had it that I think it was 10 or maybe 11 of the team that started the All-Ireland final started in Mullingar. I think it was 10. And of the four fellas that come off the bench in Croke Park, I had it that just one featured in Mullingar. So for a team that were in an Ireland final, that's a fair evolution and development. And, you know, even within that, there's Killian McDade has moved position. Cian Hernan, who, and maybe you should talk about him, but to me, he looks fantastic the other day. He looks like he has all the tools to go on and make a real career for himself. He's marking John Heslin, who's a brilliant footballer, and he kicked 2 points. But there's a lot of options there, and I think maybe it's a little bit of a shuffling the deck job for Paul, just to find exactly what the right mix is, who starts the game, who finishes, who plays where. That's going to be very key. It's going to be crucial for Galway over the next few weeks.
Gary, Donegal has just brought me into the point there. Is the biggest positive from Mullingar at the weekend the performance of Cian Hernan, and particularly Cian Hernan at full back is something we haven't really seen this year? You're just on mute.
Yeah, so one of the things I just spoke to Jerry Murphy on Galway Bay on Friday night, you know, about the game, and one of the, I suppose, questions that I had was who was going to pick up John Heslin, because I had a feeling it wasn't going to be Johnny McGrath or Jack Glynn, and then you were looking at Sean Kelly kind of playing a more orthodox full back role, and I didn't see Cian Hernan going back there. You know, maybe he has experience from underage football. I've never seen him play full back, but he was outstanding. And when I was picking man of the match on Saturday afternoon, I must say, before Peter Cook kicked his last 2 points from play, the honour was going to Cian Hernan. I thought he was outstanding. And when we were under the cosh a little bit in the second half, I think, you know, forgive me, I might think we might have been 12-10 down or something like that. He came and kicked an absolute fantastic score, and he just brought energy to it. And you know, there was questions, I suppose, you know, we didn't know when the team was named why Cathal Sweeney wasn't starting.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they knew Damien wasn't starting early doors, but I think the Pádraig is trying, and he's referenced this a number of times, building his panel, building depth, building his squad, and that's what they've done. And you know, if you were to do an analysis across all of the teams that are contenders for the All-Ireland, there's no team that you could say, you know, has developed a panel and pushed on from last year. Derry are playing some good football, but it's with the same players. Kerry not playing great at the moment, but out of form, same players. We have introduced one or two new fellas, but overall the turn, as Donegal was saying, is big in Galway. And not only then is it big, it's positive. So you're looking at the Cian Hernan, but look at the impact John Maher's having on this team. You know, and what then Cathal Sweeney, you know, he saw a bit of game time last year, but what they're doing is, particularly the guys that are getting a chance, they're performing. So John Maher could have sulked, like he deserved, you know, we don't know what the conversation was, but if you're looking at it from the outside, John Maher deserved to start that game based on his performances, didn't get the nod to start, could have sulked, could have maybe not brought the energy levels he brought to it, but like was up and at it straight away, really had a huge positive impact in the game, and put his hand up now again to say, look, if you're going to get, you can only play 15, you got to put me in one of them, so you got to find someone else to drop out. So impact of Cian Hernan really, really positive, but impact of everybody that's, I suppose, new to it and adding to it is the huge positive as well.
Just what's the feeling, lad, on Killian McDade's move? Because I found that very interesting at the weekend. But if you look at him last year, I thought that, you know, particularly against Armagh, he was brilliant. Like, in that sort of coming onto the ball, attacking midfielder role, as he described it himself after the game, and delivered some big moments. And now he's kind of been shifted out to wing back. He sort of maybe has to do a bit more marking, doesn't get to go forward, and certainly not in central positions as much. I'm not saying it's a risk because of the players you have, but it is a change for a player who looked to be nailed on in that position, given his performances last year.
Yeah, and I think the John Maher is probably it's not the unexpected, but maybe we didn't see. We knew Peter Cook was going to come back into it, and that he was operating. I suppose Pádraig initially picked him a wing forward, and I suppose the perception was that Killian, when he came back from being injured, would just slot back in straight in with Paul, and they'd renew that partnership. But then John Maher burst on the scene, playing so well, you couldn't drop him. Killian does have his experience at wing back. I had him at under 21, 2017. We played Dublin in All-Ireland final, and Killian was wing back that day and had a really, really good campaign for us. He's just so athletic. Now, I had felt, I think, Paul, did I say to you that there was the possibility that John, I think as Galway evolved, I think Killian might still end up back Like Dylan McHugh's going to come into the team. Once he's fit, he's back in. So then someone is going to lose out. My thinking would be that Killian McDade goes back there to give us a little bit more oomph going forward. And you look at someone like Cathal Sweeney or Keane Hearn and then starting to wing back. But like John Maher is going to, that means then you got to push Peter Cook up, or Paul Conroy goes into a different position. We've loads of options. And like, as I said to the lads on Saturday evening, the big plus then is that, like, if you've options on the team, means you've options on the bench. It means there's huge Kieran Malloy coming back into it, Sean Mulcairn. You've huge push then for the 26, which means when they go training Tuesday night, everybody is pushing, not just the guys that are in the starting 15. They'll probably have a bit of an A versus B, maybe Thursday evening or Saturday morning, and everybody's going to want to put their hand up. So, but Killian a wing back, probably not overly surprising, but I think as the year goes on, we might see him pushed back into that midfield role, particularly in Croke Park.
Particularly as well, Donegal, Ronan O'Toole caused Galway big issues in that first half. Killian McDade went on to him and kind of really nullified him in the second half.
Yeah, well, Ronan O'Toole is one of those fellas that if he was in a higher profile county, I think a lot of people would know who he was. I watched a lot of the Westmeath Armagh game on GAA Go, and I've just seen him a few times over the years. He's just a very, very classy footballer, very stylish, like bit of an old school centre forward, in that he can do a bit of everything. He can pick his pass and he kick points. I think on Saturday night, I think he kicked one off the left and one off the right, I think. So no, he's just a very stylish footballer. But as we sort of alluded to already, Galway have the options there. He was causing a few problems, and Killian McDade went in on him, and his athleticism, his size. I was talking to him afterwards. You forget how, like, he's obviously a brilliant athlete, but he's a huge man as well. Like, he must be 6'1" or 2", Barry, is he? So he's a huge man, how he can move that well, and obviously can do. He said himself, around the middle 8. There's a lot of similarity between those positions, and obviously he's well able to do it. But to have that option just to stick him back in at centre back to nullify a threat is just, again, another great card up Paul Joyce's sleeve.
Overall, just on the first half performance, Barry, what did you think of it from a Galway perspective?
Well, first of all, I think the breeze was really significant. If you looked at the flags over the scoreboard, like, it was blowing a gale to a certain extent, and obviously Armagh had the benefit of that, and they settled quicker, and they were causing Galway problems. And again, we kind of highlighted this, I thought it was last week or even Friday evening, chatting to Jerry again, that the Ronan O'Toole issue. Now, does it connect Ronan O'Toole? Actually, I had him as a fresher in NUIG, and as you said, old school, reminds me a bit of Marty Clark. That coming deep, getting on ball, link and play, wants to be on the ball. Doesn't matter where he gets it, he wants to be on the ball. And we struggled a little bit with that, and we struggled a little bit with Ronan Wallace, kind of his real hard running, and then they got some good scores, and they put a big press on our kick out, which I felt Conor Gleeson did well on, and they really tested us, and they were imposing, they were the team that were imposing the style of play on it. And then, but to only go in one down, I think it was good management by Galway. They never conceded, looked like conceding an awful lot, looked like they were under pressure, but they were still.
Were we passive in the first half?
Yeah, you probably were, but that's probably a bit disrespectful to Westmeath, and like they were the ones imposing their game plan, and like Jason Sherlock was beside us in the box, and he's a top coach, one of the top coaches in the country, and like Desi Dolan eats, drinks, sleeps football, and like they had their homework done, and it wasn't by accident that they should have been Armagh. It wasn't by accident that they were the team pushing in the first half against Galway. They're a good team, and they were causing Galway. And like, teams will look at this now and say that's a good. Even in like John Daly was getting caught a little bit. Was he pushing on Ronan O'Toole? Was he not? When he did push on Ronan O'Toole, they were getting players breaking the line and getting little hand passes in over the top that was causing Galway problems. And to a certain extent, the same with Killian McDade in the second half. That when he pushed on Ronan O'Toole down that left, as Westmeath were attacking down that right-hand channel, they were getting huge joy because Ronan O'Toole was vacating that spot. John Daly was trying to push over. was runners coming from everywhere, and just hand passes over his head. They were getting good scores. So again, that wasn't by accident. So I think you have to give Westmeath great credit. They found a way of causing Galway problems. But on the flip side of that, Galway found a way of, I suppose, stifling it a little bit and going on and winning the game by 8 points.
Donnchadh, do you feel there was a tendency that maybe Galway were a slight bit passive? I was just on the terrace side myself, and you could see they were trying to hold the lines, but maybe Galway were nearly taking 4 hand passes to get the ball over to the sideline. They're obviously trying to hold the line, but maybe they were just taking too much out of it at times in the opening half.
Possibly, but I think that there's 2 things. One was, as Barry said, I think the wind was very significant. It was probably, that you could pick a number out of the sky, but if you're guessing, it's probably a 4 or 5 point wind anyway, I would say, and maybe even more, because it was really, really significant. You saw the flags behind the scoreboard, and like it showed just how strong the wind was. So that was one. The other thing is, I suppose, there's an element of game management in a half like that as well. You're not going to win the game playing against the gale, but you can certainly put yourself in a hole that you have to dig yourself out of. And I think maybe Galway were trying to do that. We're trying to manage the thing to get to half time, and I think they did it reasonably well. Westmeath were playing well, but I did feel Galway were playing sort of within themselves as well to some extent. Not a few little problems, but as we mentioned, they were sort of going around putting out the fires as they needed to. The mid switches and Ronan O'Toole, and they kind of did what they had to. But when they got in a point down at half time, I thought they were in a very, very good position, and I thought of a better phrase. So, and then it came back out, and as we mentioned off air, I think the game was sort of going Galway's way anyway before the red card. I think that, there's just little signs that Westmeath was starting to tire, and the red card was just that pivotal moment that also saw Damien Comer come in, and he scored with his first 2 touches. And I think that they did, was it 9 of the last 10 points Galway scored. So they finished very, very strong. So yeah, if you were nitpicking, you'd say Galway's first half wasn't great, and it wasn't, but I don't think it needed to be anything more than it was either, if that makes sense.
For sure. And Donnchadh, Peter Cook was even talking after the match, and he was saying that it was obviously great to get the result. That's what they came here to do. But he did say they created goals, and it's something that they need to look back on. And it probably has been a pattern this year where Galway are creating the goals, but just not finishing them. But there's a huge amount of positives to be taken from that. But they will want to start putting some of these away now.
Yeah, it was. I suppose I'm just off the top of my head. Sean Kelly had that chance, the keeper made a good save, and then it came back to Ian Burke, and Ian Burke went to pass. I think instead of take, it looked like a shot was on from. I think towards the end, John McGrath was another good save from the keeper in that one. So yeah, they had a few chances, and again, you'd really be looking for faults if you said they didn't score a goal. Like, they scored 20 points on a very hot day in Mullingar. So I think it was a fairly good innings for Galway, all things told. But yeah, if you wanted to, you'd say, look, in a big game, say in Croke Park down the line, yeah, they need to be. They couldn't create 4 or 5 goal chances and list them.
And another, I think Cook hit the crossbar too. Keane Hernan in the second half nearly kind of going for a goal, and it just goes over the bar. Is that something you feel they'll be zoning in on now, Barry?
Yeah, they won't. Because sometimes some of this stuff becomes a little bit self-fulfilling. So if you keep saying that you're missing goal chances, then you nearly talk yourself into missing goal chances, where they'll just keep going with what they're doing and trust that the players will learn. And it was lots of them unlucky, as you said. Cookie hit the crossbar. The one Ian Burke had, I don't know, the Westmeath cornerback got a hand in from someplace when it looked like Matthew Tierney was just going to hand pass it in. John Maher was 1-on-1. So on another day they go in. They were clinical in terms of their goal scoring chances against Sligo. They didn't really create an awful lot of goal scoring chances against Tyrone. So I don't think it's a massive issue. I think Peter Cook, like all good footballers, they're looking for stuff to improve on. He's not going to come out and say, Jesus, yeah, lads, Everton was mighty. We can kind of put our feet up for the next couple of weeks. So they're always looking for stuff to improve on. But overall, as Donnchadh said, it was a good performance that didn't have to be brilliant. And even talking about Andy Farrell often talks about these stressor moments, and that was a stressor moment for Galway. 55 minutes, 2 points down. Probably not a situation they found themselves in that much over the last couple of years. They've usually been ahead, maybe at times fade out a game in the third quarter, let teams back into it and push on for the last quarter. And their last quarter nearly always seems to be their best. You know, like they steamrolled Westmeath in the last 15 minutes. And you know, if Galway go on and have the success that we all hope to have, no one will remember the performance in this Westmeath game. They'll just look at the 8 points win. And there's no team out there right now that will go and just, you know, hose every team that they come across, maybe like Dublin did in the middle of the last decade. You know, every team is leveling out a little bit, but it's just who can put the more consistent performances together and go on a run.
Yeah, and it hasn't been a huge problem to score goals. When you look at the Tyrone game, they scored 16, Westmeath 20. But Barry, you mentioned there about their game management, and if you compare this to last year, Galway, as you mentioned, had the ability to build up leads, and then there was a kind of frequency of other teams kind of coming back into the game. If you look at the Armagh game, if you look at the Connacht final against Roscommon last year, but is that Galway's biggest evolution this year compared to last year? Their game management of just being able to put the foot down and stay in control in these games?
No, I'd say it's still a bit of an Achilles heel. Like, look at the Roscommon game this year. They were, you know, by far and away the better team in the first half. Did Roscommon get it back level, or did they go? Did Roscommon even go point? No, they got it back level, didn't they? But you know, it has happened in a couple of games, even in the league.
Have they improved on it, or has it just been the opposite?
Have they? No, I don't know. Have they improved on that aspect of it? But what they've improved on is it's just an experience thing, Paul, as well. Like, they don't get flustered, so they'll realise that teams will get a purple patch. But they'll also realise that they'll be able to strangle it back and get going again. And they've good leaders. Like, even I was saying to someone like Paul Conroy's most influential period of the game last week, or on Saturday evening, was maybe the last 10 or 15 minutes. You know, and that's saying something for a guy who's, whatever, is he 34 years old in the searing heat. And, you know, in the last 15 minutes, when they needed to put a push on, he was just central to everything. And, you know, they trust in what they're doing. No one panics. No one seems, again, this is only from, I suppose, an observer's eye. No one seems to go away from the game plan and go off on a solo run of their own. It's very calculated, and as they trust whatever system they have in place, and they believe that that's the right one to have in place, and that will bring them the success that they want.
Do you feel that that's an area, Donnchadh, that they've improved on?
In terms of managing the game?
Yeah.
I think that's one of those things that you pick up most in sort of high pressure environments, high pressure moments, high pressure games, and obviously getting to the All Ireland final, I think will benefit them greatly in that regard. I think, like, you know, you always say you have to lose one or two to win a couple, and like Kerry definitely had to lose one or two big games, big moments before they won their All Ireland. So I think that will stand to them as the year goes on. I did a piece with Shane Walsh going back a few weeks or a couple of months ago. He was just talking about how, you know, when he looked at the All Ireland final last year, he just saw what he was doing wrong, what they were doing wrong in the last 10 or 15 minutes against Kerry. So I think, you know, when that crunch moment comes, and it will come at some stage for Galway, be it quarterfinal, semi-final, final, or whatever, I think that crunch moment comes. I think the All Ireland final last year and the benefit of being there, knowing what they did wrong, will stand to them. I think that's it's very rarely you see someone coming off the rails or coming from the pack to win something. So I think you kind of have to serve an apprenticeship to some extent.
And Donnchadh, in that at half-time, Westmeath went in leading by 1 point at the break. Then they go 11-9 up. They looked in good control then. Obviously, it goes back to 11-all. Ray Connellan gets his second yellow then, his first yellow on 34 minutes. It has a huge bearing on the game. But what did Galway do differently after that period then?
I think Damien Comer's introduction gave them a bit of energy. So there was a couple of very significant moments within about 2 or 3 minutes of each other. Connellan went off, Westmeath were down to 14, and Connellan, like, offers a lot. He's very athletic, and another guy who's in the AFL, covers ground, tracks runners. I think he kicked the mark in the first half. He can do a little bit of everything. He's very modern sort of midfielder. I like him as a player. I think he's very impressive. So he went off. Shane Walsh kicked the free, I think, which put Galway up immediately afterwards, and Damien Coma came on and he scored with his first 2 touches. So in about a 3-minute period, Westmeath went from being level in 15 against 15 to being 3 down with one of the better forwards in the country and Damien Coma coming off the bench fresh when they were just starting to fade. So I think all those things kind of conspired. And then once the game was gone from that sense, I think Galway sensed it. I think Westmeath sensed it, and there wasn't much else that they could do. I just think it was almost inevitable from them when they went to 3rd point up. Very hard to see Westmeath with 14 coming back into it.
The lift, even at that stage as well, Barry, that Damien Comer gave to go, you could even sense it from the crowd at the game.
Sure. He's one of those people. I suppose he's a bit of a like Tony Kelly and Clare. Like when he gets a score, it's nearly worth more than just the 1 point. And like he's just so like he has everything. He has an ability to kick off left and right, which all the top forwards do. His ability to win his own ball is outstanding. And like I felt sorry for the fella that was marking him. I looked in at one stage, like he just had acres of room left and right of him. Even the first ball that he got, like when he went to stand up Damien could have gone left or right with absolutely no traffic and went to go left and kicked it over the bar. And like there were huge moments, and we'll need Damien operating at full tilt. And the 3 points will have been, a big boost to his confidence as well. And like he's a marquee forward like Shane is, and we're lucky to have them. But the big challenge is that we make sure that they're operating at full tilt. They can't do it, it's a long campaign. They can't do it in every single game. But the challenge for Galway management and for themselves is to make sure that when we're going down the stretch, both of them are in top form. And then the challenge for everybody else is the supporting cast is to back them as much as possible and make sure that they're not shirking any of the responsibility. So we need the Matthew Tierneys, we need Ian Burks, we need Rob Finnerty. Johnny Heaney does it most days for us as well. We need these lads pushing, chipping in with scores and making sure that they're helping out as much as possible and taking on as much responsibility as possible.
The press, Barry, as well, with the introduction of John Maher, was definitely a huge turning point.
That's just an energy thing. I think I've said it to you before here. I remember listening to a John Kiley interview last year, I think, after some game, and the interview was 12 minutes long, and he mentioned energy. Used the word energy 14 times, and that's what they're looking for. Just someone to come in, bring an impact into the game, not just be not as you said passive, not just happy that he's seen a bit of game time, actually add to the situation. And John Maher certainly did. Drove forward, got tackles in, won breaks around the middle. I think he'd won one big catch around the middle as well from a kick out. So all in all, really good performance by him and everybody.
Have you seen an improvement in John Maher's skills in the last 2 years compared to maybe when he was 2020? He was brought in with Galway. Have you seen an improvement on even his footballing skills? Because we all know the fielding ability John Maher has had.
Well, I think I saw them like he was. I saw Till McCarra in a good few games last year, and he was really good. He was probably the standout midfielder in Galway last year. He was exceptional, and like John Maher's probably about 6'4". He's probably touching 100 kgs, but yet he could motor up and down the pitch all day long for you. He has so much in his armoury that I suppose is what you want from a top class senior county footballer. And as you said, he has developed his skills. I think the one thing that he has developed, and I'm not sure is this something that John O'Mahony can take credit for, or is Pádraig and Keane and the lads in the Galway panel can take credit for, but he just looks like a guy that has huge confidence now. And I remember at under 21, you could see it was obvious to anyone that John Maher had loads of ability. I just don't think it was obvious to John Maher, and that's no slight on him. He's a young guy, and it just took him a couple of years to, I suppose, find him, get comfortable in his own skin, and realise that he has the ability to go and make an impact at the top level. And the last thing I'll say about the big thing that all of these guys, top guys, have is he's a really good fella as well. Like just a good, honest, decent fella, comes from good stock, and it's no surprise that he's making the impact that he is.
Yeah, and really the difference, Donnchadh, if you're looking back on the game overall, 14-12 at 59 minutes, Galway kicked the last 6, Westmeath don't score from the 59th minute.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier, just like there was a couple of factors that fed into that, and the red card, but definitely the energy within the game had changed. You kind of felt that Westmeath had thrown everything at it, and the red card had sort of sucked life from them, and Galway sensed blood really, and they went for it. So yeah, that was encouraging from a Galway point of view. But again, that's tempered by the red card, and it's tempered by the conditions as well, because it opened up a little bit, and once it opened up, kicking those points became a little bit easier. And even that goal chance we referenced that John McGrath had, I think it was a save by the keeper, looking at it in real time. So Galway finished very strong.
Peter Cook's performance, Donnchadh, we've seen him working so hard in the wing forward position, but we've seen him deployed to midfield at the weekend, and the 4 points he kicked, they weren't just simple points, they were all out top drawer points that he scored himself.
Yeah, and I have to be honest, he's someone I've not seen that much of between one thing and another over the last few years, but I knew of his reputation. I knew with Mike Cullen that, how highly he was thought of and what he'd done with them. So, he was really good, but that was the one takeaway I took from the weekend. It was kind of like, who do Galway play in their middle 2 or sometimes middle 3 as it is now, with with a wing forward repositioned as essentially a third midfielder, and that was one of the big ones I took away from it. And to in all the areas, and they're blessed in most areas, but midfield they're totally stacked, and figuring out exactly who's going to start, who's going to finish, that's the big one for Porrick.
Okay, just put one to you. For you this year, who consistently is being Galway's top performer?
What I've seen, well, I think over a long period of time and with his club and everything, I think Sean Kelly's been exceptional. And not only because, in his role as a defender, he's kind of everything Galway needed him to be, whenever they needed him to be it. So Galway was sort of struggling a little bit for traction early on when they created that goal chance we mentioned earlier, all that the keeper saved. I think he saved it with his head, and then it fell to Ian Burke afterwards. And then the second half, if you remember, there was a moment where I think the referee, and I've never seen it before, I don't know if you have, but Kelly went about 70 or 80 metres with the ball, and he laid it off at the last moment. And as he laid it off, 2 Westmeath players clattered him, and both of them got booked for the same tackle. I don't know if you remember that in the second half. And it was quite remarkable, you never see it, but his ability to pop up and do, if he needed to, we were talking about earlier on, he might have been a full back. It turns out he was wing back. And Westmeath sent Ronan Wallace to track him, to kind of trying to negate his influence and try and pin him back a little bit, which was an interesting move and a clever move and all that. But it shows the esteem he's held in inter-county football circles, that they're sending out someone to do a job on him when he's effectively going to operate somewhere in the defensive line. Pops up with goals and points. I think he's sort of off the Galway I've seen, he's sort of the heartbeat, wasn't he? I think he was on Clifford as well in the All-Ireland final last year, if memory serves. So he's he's sort of everything Galway need him to be, and he has been now for a couple of years consistently. And yeah, he's a brilliant asset. I think now, of all the talented players Galway have, I think Sean Kelly will be, if there's transfer market, I think Sean will be very top of the list.
Has he been your top performer, Barry?
Yeah, there's been a few. I've been on record in a few of these podcasts and stuff of saying, to me, Sean Kelly is the best footballer that Galway have produced since Michael Meehan, and that's including anyone that's there at the present moment. I think he's just a Rolls Royce. And if you notice, one thing for me is the timing of his offloads. Just watch it, are always absolutely.
That's what got him clattered.
That's what gets him clattered every day, because he brings it. Like if you were to take a rugby parlance, he takes it right to the line. So he takes it right to the last moment, he offloads, and he nearly always takes a hit, but he just bounces back up and he's gone. And it's just his leadership as well, in that, went straight from the Mike Cullen campaign back in first game for Galway for the league. So what's that telling the younger guys and the older guys, is that this is it, lads. There's no backward step being taken. I'm here. I've had a long year. NUIG, Mike Cullen, maybe have had the odd hamstring issue. Don't want to rest. Don't want to break. I'm I'm on this bus for the foreseeable, and there's no getting off it, and he's so important to us. You'd have to give Johnny McGrath massive credit as well. I think he's had a brilliant year. I think Cathal Sweeney has been one of our top performers, and I think Paul Conroy is central to absolutely everything that we do. So I'd say in no particular order, I'd say those 4 guys are probably the standouts so far in league and championship.
Donnchadh, we mentioned earlier at the podcast, Barry has the Burlington booked. Galway are excited. We nearly have to put it to an outside voice every time they come on the podcast. Can Galway win, Sam, and why?
Yes, and because consistency, in a word, it's consistency. So if you look around, there's absolutely nobody pulling up trees. Mayo and Galway, I think, are the 2 market leaders. You look at Dublin, they've been good, they've been very good, they've been pretty ordinary by their standards as well over the course of the championship. I always thought, and I still have the feeling, that Dublin will be fine when the real stuff comes around, which is about 2 weeks away. Now that some of the performances, I thought to be a little bit better now than they are, but I still think that it'll take a hell of a team to beat them. I think if you beat Dublin, you're going to win the All-Ireland. I think that's one. We know Kerry are struggling. If something happened, David Clifford, I don't know what they'd be at the minute. But they don't look like a team who's going to retain an All-Ireland title right now. They have great powers of recovery. We know all about that. They do it sort of semi-regular, and we know all the stories, and 2009 and the start of Learwig's game, and I wouldn't put that past them. But right now, you can absolutely, there's question marks over them. Of the other teams, Tyrone haven't looked like All-Ireland champions since they won it, really. You look at their, on paper, potentially, yeah. But I don't know. Armagh, who were, beaten by yourselves, again, just a lot of question marks over them. They don't look like a team who were a penalty shoot away from an Ireland semi-final last year either. So if you look at all the contenders, with the exception of Mayo and Galway, I would say you could have question marks over them. Roscommon are moving nicely too. They've been pretty consistent this year and tend to be out of the All-Ireland conversation. And I don't know if they're going to win one, but it'll take a good team to stop them the way they're moving at the minute, because they're very, apart from, we talk about their forwards a lot, and rightly so, but there's defensive structure this year, and the fact they've been kind of keeping concession rates down has been a good one. So it's a very wide open championship, but Galway are in a very good position along with your neighbours, I think, in terms of winning it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something you could see. Connacht teams in a real crunch knockout game this year. As I mentioned earlier on the show, Galway Armagh Sunday week in Carrick-on-Shannon in round 3 of the All-Ireland series. Then it'll progress to the preliminary quarterfinals and the All-Ireland quarterfinals. That's all we have time for on our show for today. Thanks a million to the lads for coming on.
Cheers, Paul.
The Backdoor GAA Podcast for 2023 is now brought to you by Steede Motor Group. For your personalised vehicle shopping experience, visit steedemotorgroup.ie. We are now delighted to announce our second sponsor of the podcast. Harper Finlay are a professional service recruitment company operating nationwide and are dedicated to helping people find their dream job.